أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خاتم الأنبياء وسيد المرسلين حبيبنا وعزيزنا محمد وعلى آله أهل بيته الطاهرين وأصحابه المهتدين ومن سار على نهجهم إلى يوم الدين. My dear brothers, my dear sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This week we will continue trekking the ups and downs of our first chapter of history after our dear Prophet alayhi wa alihi salatu wassalam passed away. And then, as I clarified last week, there's two tracks we are working on: exposing the fanaticism, the self-centered fanaticism of Bani Israel, and that same self-centered fanaticism as it has infected our own history, albeit in the upper levels of society, more than in the other segments of society. Upper levels of power, that is. Okay, so last week we were speaking about a taliq, not a sahabi, as there are different definitions of sahabi, but generally speaking, the way it is publicly understood by most Muslims. Muawiyah was not one of them. Muawiyah was a taliq. One of the indicators of process in our mental development is when we can make a transition that distinguishes a sahabi from a taliq. When we reach that level of understanding, we will have made very significant progress. So some good-intentioned Muslims, and some of them void of good intentions, would ask, why are you bringing up the issue of Muawiyah nowadays? This is one of those controversial chapters in history. Let it be buried in history books, and let's get on with the responsibilities that we are to be accountable for. This sounds very good. Of course, I could agree with that 100%, if it were not for those who still carry in them the Muawiyah bug, the bug that is so destructive to Islamic harmony and to Imani unity. It's so harmful that it has infested our populations with that disease of sectarianism. So instead of dealing with the bits and pieces or with the diagnostics of the symptoms of sectarianism, I'm trying to go to the root of the problem. The root of the problem did not begin with Al-Khulafa Al-Rashidin. The root of the problem began with Bani Umayyah. We meaning all of us Muslims, and remember, I always have to remind you that there are exceptions to the rule. But the overwhelming majority of us, we have inherited divisions, misunderstandings, suspicions, anger, isolation from each other, and accusations of each other. This has been an inheritance, a mental and a cultural inheritance that we live with. The best exemplification of that is the inability of a Muslim Shi'i to go into a masjid in which the overwhelming majority of musallin, attendees, come from a Sunni heritage and pray exactly as they pray. The same thing can be said about a Sunni who goes into a masjid that is predominantly attended by Shi'is, and the Imam in that masjid is a Shi'i, of course, and he fails to follow them. As trivial as this may sound, but it indicates how deep rooted this problem is in our psychology and in our societies. In other words, one Muslim, whether he's a Sunni or a Shi'i, is incapable of exchanging equal recognition with these rituals. We're talking about rituals here. A Shi'i prays with his hands to his side, a Sunni prays with his hands in front of him. That simple recognition is not forthcoming from us, which tells me and you that we are unable to equalize ourselves. And that's only one example of the many examples out there. We have not only in our cultural everyday activities, but in our stuffed into our academic books, the concept of adalat al-sahaba. This idea has it that anyone who is called a sahabi, and remember, this bulldozing word, sahabi, has marginalized all of the munafiqeen, all of the a'rab, all of the mu'allafa qulubuhum, all of the rest of the designations that are in the Quran that were in the first Islamic society. The word of Sahaba has claimed them by those, of course, and all of this began in the time of Muawiyah. That's why it's very important to concentrate on that personality. This is where all of this begins. The same way that we have among the Shi'is the concept of isma, adalat al-sahaba on the Sunni side and ismat al-a'imma on the Shi'i side, are two punching bags that each side uses. The Shi'is do their punching against the adalat al-sahaba idea. The Sunnis do their punching against the ismat al-imam idea. And they've been doing that, and the Muslim body has been broken throughout these 14 centuries because of these jabs and these hooks from the left to the right and the right to the left against our own selves. Who are we punching? Ourselves. And it continues, and it's about time that we try to get to the bottom of this. Muawiyah, King Muawiyah, let's be Taliq Muawiyah, during Muawiyah the Taliq, during the known as such, during the Prophet and the Khulafa''s time, which was accurate. But then, after Al-Imam Ali and Al-Imam Al-Hassan, that ruled on par with the standards of the Quran and the Prophet, here comes King Muawiyah, or autocratic Muawiyah. He is the one who institutionalized political despotism among the Muslims. There was no shura during the time of Muawiyah. There were civil wars. He wanted to do something. His first option was to go to war. His first option was not to bring together the Muslims, put their minds and hearts together, and work through a particular issue. This should have been done in today's world, in the different geographies in which Muslims right now are battling out, killing themselves. Unfortunately, because the level of correct understanding of our own selves leaves a lot to be desired. Those who defend Muawiyah, whether it was during his rule, even up until today, they also have a common thread among them, and that is that they also defend oppressive rulers in our time, kings and presidents who are oppressive rulers are defended by the same quote-unquote scholars who defend Muawiyah. So we said that those who, and the word Sunni and the word Shia have become tribalistic words. Anyone who uses the word Sunni to identify himself, and also anyone who uses the word Shi'i to identify himself, is only telling me and any other enlightened Muslim that he's a tribalist. They've reduced the unity of Muslim into competing tribalisms. Let's ask ourselves a question. If you've ever heard a speaker, a Sunni speaker, and I'm using the word Sunni here because I'm forced to. This is the only way it's going to be understood, unless I go into another lesson of another half hour to explain why I prefer not to use that word. It should have been why, if you would ask an Umawi, not a Sunni. But maybe we can clarify this issue later on sometime in the future. If you were to ask a Sunni, why do you say Muawiyah radiyallahu anhu? You will hear that from probably 90% plus of Sunni speakers when they mention Muawiyah. Maybe 90% is an exaggeration, but the majority of Muslim speakers, whether they are khutaba, whether they are imams in the masajid, whether they are speaking at conferences, and they mention the word Muawiyah, they will say radiyallahu an. Why does a person, up until this day, Muawiyah's history is long gone, But up until this day, this speaker who says Muawiyah radiyallahu anhu should understand that Muawiyah was instrumental. He was the provocateur. He was the instigator of Islamic civil wars in which tens of thousands of Sahabis were killed. He was also the reason why thousands of Muslim women's honor was violated. He was the one who canceled Ashura among the Muslim public. If he wanted to discuss something, it would have been by those who paid him total loyalty, and that's not Shura. He was the one who institutionalized the cursing and condemnation of Al-Imam Ali and Ahl al-Bayt on the manabir, on the pulpits, across the Islamic domain and that continued for centuries by his Umayyad heirs. There's a hadith by the Prophet, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him and his, خرجه الألباني, Nasir al-Din al-Albani, one of these Salafi, call them neo-atavistic thinkers, who is considered a top-notch scholar by the neo-Salafis and neo-Wahhabis and all of that crowd who are on the bankrolling list of the petro-dollar kingdoms. He said that this hadith that I'm going to quote right now is a sahih hadith, which means no one should have any doubt this is a hadith that the Prophet said. It's been established, it's authenticated, it is valid. So what's the hadith? The Prophet, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him and his, said, أول من يغير سنتي رجل من بني أمية. The first one to alter or change my sunnah is going to be a man belonging to Bani Umayyah. أول من يغير سنتي رجل من بني أمية. If this is, and it is, a hadith that is considered to be sahih by all those who say that they are Sunnis, then please, I beg you, ask yourself, who is that? Who is that person that changed the standards and the pattern, the methodology of the Prophet? Who is it? And Al-Albani, Nasir al-Din al-Albani, the muhaddith, in commenting on this same hadith says, in explaining what the sunnah, أول من يغير سنتي, the first one to change my methodology. Al-Albani explains what the methodology, what the Prophet meant by the word sunnah or methodology here in this quote is altering the rulership, from shura to mulk, from a system that makes its decision through a process of public and mutual consultation, that's shura, to al-mulk, to a monarchy, to a form of rulership that excludes people from being involved in deciding their own affairs. That's Nasr ad-Din al-Albani speaking. It's not me. We have to say that some of our speakers did not get accepted, some of our Islamic scholarly speakers, some of them, please don't take my words out of context and blow them out of proportion. Let's be careful with what we are saying and what we are understanding. Some of these Islamic khatibs, spokespersons, luminaries, celebrities, scholars, ulama, did not get accepted to the faculty of engineering at a particular university. They did not get accepted into medical school. They did not get accepted into these sought out careerist positions. And so they went to study Islamic studies. And they've become the types that we are talking about here. Not everyone. These types have become spokespersons for the powers that be. The monarchies of today, extending all the way back to the first monarchy in Islam, and that is the monarchy of Bani Umayyah. Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, another well-known scholar, in his book Tahdhib al-Tahdhib, mentions the extent of oppression during Umayyad rule, in which if a person was to name his son Ali, would be committing a type of crime for which he will be severely punished. So Ibn Hajar, in his reference book Tahdhib al-Tahdhib, mentions this one family in which the father named his son Ulay, not Ali, Ulay. It's spelled the same, Ain Lam Ya, and Ulay is the diminution of the name Ali, meaning like Hussein is the smaller Hassan, Ulay is the smaller Ali. Two different names. But even when this father is trying to avoid the official regulation that you can't have your son by the name of Ali, because anyone who would have that name during the rule of Bani Umayyah was a suspect who may be killed very easily. It's like just by having that name, he's considered to be a subversive and therefore wanted by the authorities, and therefore they should get rid of him. This was official policy. If we only read our own history books and make sense of what happened then. even in Al-Bukhari, it's been established that the fact that Bani Umayyah officialized the condemnation of Imam Ali at the end of every khutbah. It was only Umar ibn Abdul Aziz who can be considered the last true Khalifa that the Muslims had. Of course, he came from Bani Umayyah, but he was a man of standards, of virtue, and of goodwill. He was the one who changed that, and it's that condemnation at the end of the Jumu'ah khutbah to إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. This is the same ayah, I think it's in Surah Al-Nahl, the same ayah that almost all of the persons who deliver the Jumu'ah khutbah end their khutbah with. And then there's another thing that Muawiyah did, and I'm just going to mention this briefly, and that is there was a person by the name of Ziyad. Ziyad was what some may call the illegitimate son of Abu Sufyan. Ziyad's mother was called Sumayya. Her name was Sumayya. And some people used to call Ziyad the son of Sumayya, Ziyad ibn Sumayya. Muawiyah knew that his father fornicated Abu Sufyan, Sakhr ibn Harb, fornicated with Sumayya and had this illegitimate child. And there was a controversy at that time back and forth. Many people used to refer to Ziyad as Ziyad ibn Abihi. Either they would say Ziyad ibn Sumayya or Ziyad ibn Abihi. Ziyad, the son of Sumayya, or Ziyad, the son of his father, because his father was not known. Muawiyah knew who his father was, but the public did not know who his father was. His father was the father of Muawiyah. So this was Muawiyah's half-brother. Ziyad was Muawiyah's half-brother. And so Muawiyah wanted to establish that fact in contradiction to what Al-Waladu lil-Firash, the Prophet, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, said, Al-Waladu lil-Firash. We attribute the newborn to the legitimacy of a marriage that is consummated in the legitimate bed of marriage. It's probably the easiest way to explain this whole affair. But Muawiyah didn't recognize all of this. He said, a legitimate name would come from an illegitimate sexual relationship between a man and a woman. And that's been one of those issues that many Muslim scholars condemn Muawiyah for doing. If you read At-Tabari, zero in on when he speaks about Muawiyah, he says, when Muawiyah died, the Sahaba said, Mata taghiyatuhum. The autocrat, the authoritarian of Bani Umayyah has died. Mata taghiyatuhum. So the condemnation of Imam Ali and Ahl al-Bayt continued for about 90 years throughout all of the masajid that were controlled by the Umayyad state at that time. Inshallah, we will pick up, as our time has run out right now, we'll pick up on this in the future with Allah's help and Allah's guidance. A reminder to us all, remain with Allah and He will remain with you. May Allah guide us to say the truth and follow up with justice. وصلى الله على محمد وآل محمد والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.